Here is a breakdown and synopsis of Psalm the 58th chapter, with an emphasis on Psalm 58 at verse 3. A scriptural essay by Azariyah Barakyah. Below is a verse-focused exegetical breakdown of Psalm chapter 58 at verse 3. The wicked are estranged from the womb. They go astray as soon as they be born, speaking lies. Let's segment this verse into 3 phrases for an in-depth overview. Phrase 1. The wicked are estranged from the womb. Estranged in this context denotes alienation, separation, and/or being set apart from all that is righteous, not just from a spiritual perspective. It can also be observed behaviorally. This phrase does imply literal guilt prior to birth, not necessarily in a forensic sense. Rather, it conveys an innate spiritual disposition and/or early manifestations of corrupted behavior. Generally speaking, in Hebrew, the womb often functions as a symbolic origin point, emphasizing how early the patterns of righteousness and unrighteousness becomes evident. David is describing predetermined and deep-rooted moral corruption, not incidental wrongdoing. Phrase 2, they go astray as soon as they be born. Go astray. In Hebrew we call this ta'ah, which conveys wandering, deviating, or straying from a prescribed path. What does this look like in real time? A rebellious spirit, especially when one rebels against that which is good for one's overall well-being. This can translate into self-deprivation of one's physical, philosophical, moral, and most importantly, one's spiritual health. The emphasis is on immediacy. The deviation is not gradual, but appears as soon as moral agency is exercised. This language underscores a pattern of rebellion, not just a single act. Phrase 3, speaking lies. Speech is highlighted because, biblically speaking, words can inadvertently reveal what's in one's spirit. Lying in this context is not limited to false statements. It can and does include deception in judgment, corrupt testimony, manipulation of truth for power or advantage. This ties directly into the chapter's broader theme of unjust leaderships and corrupt judges who weaponize words to pervert justice. However, this is not limited to leaders and judges. This extends deep into the various aspects of human nature. Summary of verse 3. Psalm 58:3 asserts that the wicked demonstrate an entrenched, early revealed inclination toward deception and injustice, evidenced by habitual falsehood rather than an occasional isolated failure. There is so much more that can be said on this subject, but we will save that for another time. For now, let's get into the overview of the entire 58th chapter. Synopsis of Psalm 58. Psalm 58 is an imprecatory psalm, meaning a spoken curse attributed to David, confronting corrupt rulers and judges. It opens up by questioning whether those in authority truly speak righteousness and judge with equity. This psalm accuses the wicked of deliberate injustice, violence sanctioned through authority, deception as a defining trait. The wicked are likened to venomous serpents that refuse correction, deaf adders immune to lawful restraint. David petitions for divine intervention using vivid imagery. Teeth broken, power dissolved, their influence rendered ineffective. The psalm anticipates a future vindication where the righteous rejoice, not in cruelty, but in the restoration of justice. It becomes evident that there is a God who judges in the earth. The chapter closes by affirming moral accountability, especially for those who abuse power. Core theological emphasis. Psalm 58 speaks to the everyday rebellion that we can and cannot see against all that is righteous and just. This is an indictment against those who are entrenched in the various types of corruption. It asserts that unchecked injustice invites divine judgment and that truth, equity, and righteousness will ultimately be upheld. For an added benefit, I've structured a cross-reference of Psalm 58 with the Torah, the Apocrypha, and the New Testament, with focus on its central themes: corrupt judgment, deceptive speech, divine vengeance, and the certainty of righteous recompense. First up, we will cross-references Psalm 58 with the Torah, which is the foundation of divine justice. Number 1. Let's start with the corrupt judges and unjust rulers. Psalm chapter 58 at verses 1 through 2. Do ye indeed speak righteousness, O congregation? Do ye judge uprightly? Deuteronomy chapter 16 at verses 18 through 20. Judges are commanded to judge righteously and forbidden from perverting justice or taking bribes. Psalm 58 functions as a covenant lawsuit, accusing rulers of violating Torah law. Exodus chapter 23 at verses 6 through 8. Thou shalt not wrest the judgment of thy poor, take no bribe. Psalm 58 condemns those who do exactly this, especially through violence and deceit. Number 2. Violence sanctioned by authority. Psalm chapter 58 at verse 2. In the earth ye weigh the violence of your hands. Genesis chapter 6 at verses 11 through 13b. The earth is corrupted because it is filled with violence, prompting divine judgment. The same moral trigger for judgment appears in Psalm 58. Numbers chapter 35 at verse 33. Bloodshed pollutes the land and demands recompense. Psalm 58 assumes this legal reality. Injustice defiles the earth itself. Number 3. Divine vengeance belongs to Yahweh. Psalm chapter 58 at verses 6 through 9. Imprecatory pleas for divine judgment. Deuteronomy chapter 32 at verse 35. To me belongeth vengeance and recompense. David does not seek personal revenge, but appeals to covenant justice. Now let's cross-reference the Apocrypha, putting focus on wisdom and judgment. 1. Corrupt authority and false speeches. Psalm chapter 58 at verses 3 through 4. The wicked speak lies from the outset. Wisdom of Solomon chapter 1 at verses 1 through 5. Righteousness is required of rulers. Deceit separates one from divine wisdom. This mirrors Psalm 58's claim that lying speech reveals moral alienation. Sirach chapter 20 at verses 24 through 26. Also known as Ecclesiasticus 20:24-26. Lies are portrayed as habitual and self-destructive, especially among those seeking power. 2. The divine retribution on the ungodly. Psalm chapter 58 at verses 10 through 11. The righteous see recompense. Wisdom of Solomon chapter 3 at verses 1 through 9. The righteous are ultimately vindicated, while the ungodly face judgment. Psalm 58 anticipates this same eschatological reversal. 2 Esdras chapter 7 at verses 20 through 25. Many are created, but few walk the narrow path. Judgment is unavoidable. This aligns well with Psalm chapter 58, that evil does not go unanswered. Now we jump into the New Testament cross-references, affirming the fulfillment and expansion. First talking point. We look at the hypocrites and their corrupt judgment. Speaks to false righteousness with emphasis on, but not limited to, false leaders. Psalm chapter 58 at verse 1. Matthew chapter 23 at verses 23 through 28. Yahweh Shai condemns religious leaders and those persons who appear righteous but are inwardly corrupt. The same observations David presents in Psalm 58. In Luke chapter 11 at verses 39 and 44. Leaders are compared to hidden corruption that defiles others knowingly and unknowingly. Second talking point. Innate deception in their heart. Psalm chapter 58 at verses 3. Speaking habitual lies from the beginning. John chapter 8 at verse 44. Those who practice lies align themselves with deception, unrighteousness, and false doctrines and should not be trusted or followed, with emphasis on patterned behavior, not accidental failures. Romans chapter 3 at verses 10 through 18, reiterating Psalms. Paul explicitly draws from Psalms to show universal corruption among the unjust. Thirdly, the divine judgment and rejoicing in justice. Psalm chapter 58 at verses 10 through 11. The righteous shall and will rejoice at the judgment of the unrighteous. Revelation chapter 18 at verses 20. Heaven rejoices when corruption is judged. Our rejoicing is not and will not be cruelty, but a vindication for righteousness. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 at verses 6 through 8. It is righteous for Yahweh God to repay affliction to those who afflict others. That all being said, we can easily unify the theological thread across the Torah, the Apocrypha, and the New Testament. Psalm chapter 58 affirms 5 key points. 1. Justice can definitely be objective, biased, and covenant-based. 2. All authority is and will always be accountable to the Most High God Yahweh. 3. Deception is a darkness that will always be revealed. No matter how entrenched the corruption is buried or disguised, the light of righteousness will find it. 4. Divine vengeance is measured, righteous, and inevitable. 5. The righteous will ultimately prevail and experience vindication by the righteous hand of Yahweh God through our Messiah, Yahweh Shai.